Hello, I'm Andy Agafangelo. I'm carrying out this video interview in relation to the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Personal Banking and Fairer Financial Services call for evidence about the Financial Conduct Authority. I'm also, however, the founder of the Transparency Task Force, which provides the secretariat to the All-Party Parliamentary Group. This particular video interview is rather unusual in that it's a video interview of somebody pretending to be a respondent to the call for evidence. To be more precise, I'm going to be video interviewing Jan Floyd Douglas, who's pretending to be somebody who, for the sake of this exercise, we are going to be calling Leslie. So Leslie represents an individual who is a current employee of the Financial Conduct Authority who has stepped forward and provided a written submission to the APPG and its call for evidence about the Financial Conduct Authority. In a moment, we are going to invite Jan Floyd Douglas to briefly introduce herself. And having done that, we're going to then move on to what would normally be the beginning of a normal video interview, where we'll be asking Leslie to introduce herself by way of responding to the questions put to her. I hope that's all clear, everybody. Jan, could you please briefly introduce yourself? Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Andy. I'm Jan Floyd Douglas, and I'm one of the TTF ambassadors in the UK.
Thank you very much indeed, Jan. And as explained, I'm now going to be commencing the video interview of Leslie, who is pretending to be, the video interview of Leslie, who is the person that Jan is obviously pretending to be for the sake of this exercise. And I'll start that video interview process in just a moment. Hello, I'm Andy Agafangelo. I'm carrying out this video interview of Leslie in my capacity as chair of the Secretariat Committee to the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Personal Banking and Fairer Financial Services. I am also, however, the founder of the Transparency Task Force, which provides the Secretariat to the All-Party Parliamentary Group. Leslie, thank you very much indeed for agreeing to have this conversation with me. As you know, the conversation is being video recorded. The video recording will be placed on the APPG's website and will raise awareness of it through social media. You're carrying out this conversation with me on the basis that you have already provided a written submission to the APPG's call for evidence about the Financial Conduct Authority. I'll move now to question number one. Are you a current or former employee, contractor, or agency supplied worker at the Financial Conduct Authority?
I'm a current employee.
Thank you. And in broad terms, what is your experience of working at the FCA been like?
Overall, a negative and depressing time, really, in working at the FCA. The FCA has developed a toxic culture and spends huge resources, time and effort on self-protection of itself and at the expense of supporting consumers. The FCA appears to operate in a malicious and vindictive way and is not willing to accept any kind of constructive criticism from staff. The FCA is wasting money and staff effort on self-protection, while it's quite sickening when set against the context of its failures in recent years to regulate firms properly. Based on the evidence I've seen, the FCA is simply not doing its job and has become a failing, bloated and defensive organisation, with most of its efforts and resources going on self-promotion and trying to counter the many criticisms of it.
Thank you. During your period of employment, did you witness any actions or conduct that, in your reasonable belief, breached any law, regulatory code, or applicable or relevant policy? If so, Leslie, please explain which law, code, or policy you believe was breached.
Yes, on a number of occasions, it's been the case that the FCA will not act to support consumers, and it will spend time and resources protecting itself and making excuses for its continuous failures. It's worrying that senior managers appear to be more motivated by self-interest only and not about doing the right thing to protect consumers.
What examples, Leslie, can you share about when the FCA has done a good job to protect consumer interests?
I honestly can't say the FCA has done a good job at all. The FCA has had a string of failures and public reports criticising its performance, including 2 independent investigations, as well as the report of the Treasury Select Committee. The FCA tries desperately to promote itself and ignores the fact that large numbers of people have lost huge savings as a result of their proven failures.
What example or examples can you share about when the FCA has done a poor job to protect consumer interests?
Well, the independent investigation reports have made clear that the FCA has failed to act in the properly and timely way despite all the evidence. The 2 independent investigation reports were very critical of the FCA's failure to act, but also their conduct in trying to protect senior managers from the criticism due to their failures. The key point to add is that after each of the recent catastrophic failures, the official line is that we will learn and change. Well, as an employee, I can say there is no evidence of any learning whatsoever. Every internal communications briefing is about self-promotion, and the poor management and leadership behaviours have become more and more entrenched over time.
What are your thoughts on whether the FCA lacks the powers that it needs, or conversely, that it doesn't make good use of the powers it already has?
Even if it were given more powers, the evidence, including the independent investigation reports, the fact is the FCA's culture is toxic and means they will continue to focus on self-protection rather than why it exists, including protecting and supporting consumers. This could have been a legitimate consideration now, but it won't work as the FCA is now toxic. Giving it more powers would even possibly make things worse, as it would not know how to use such powers.
Have you experienced any difficulties or shortcomings in your interactions with the FCA?
Yes, I have tried to raise serious matters with senior managers, and they've been entirely unresponsive. I could not believe that senior managers simply refuse to listen to serious concerns, even where evidence is provided about a senior manager's misconduct. The FCA is an unprofessional and incompetent organisation. The culture is simply that you're expected not to deviate from the message that ExCo and the FCA as a whole are apparently doing excellently.
Have you experienced the FCA being reluctant to give clear answers to questions, whether from you, the public, or other stakeholders?
Yes, the FCA has been giving weasel words to questions raised by staff regarding the current transformation. So the FCA rejected the Unite Union's contact to discuss whether it would recognise it as a trade union. This has become a big issue for many staff regarding senior managers' disingenuous comments about why they do not make assumptions about staff wanting to be represented by unions. People are now entirely fed up with weasel words when even the Bank of England recognises trade unions.
And have you been in a situation where you could have helped a member of the public with an inquiry, but were constrained from doing so as a direct result of an FCA policy or the FCA's interpretation of applicable law?
Well, I know that following the independent investigation reports, it was clear that staff raised concerns about certain firms acting illegally. But senior managers would not follow the questions up that were raised. This is the real tragedy of London and Capital Finance et al., that frontline staff were raising concerns, but senior managers were ordering them to stop raising these matters.
What is your perception of the culture of the FCA, and what do you think of it? Does it promote openness, or is there a lack of transparency?
The culture of the FCA is incredibly poor. It's absolutely awful, and I would have to say it is toxic. Judging by the questions raised in response to the current consultation, a majority of the workforce just seem to be demoralised and frustrated by the weasel words and statements that a union is not needed when we have the Staff Consultative Committee, that's SCC, even when 4 SCC members say that ordinary staff with no time of facility or support and a union would be better able to negotiate with senior management. But the FCA continues to refuse to recognise the union Unite and continues to make odd assertions. In my view, based on the evidence I've seen, the FCA has become a navel-gazing organisation, almost operating in a parallel universe. The culture became keep the gravy train running and don't get caught for mistakes, i.e. even if that means doing nothing much of the time. And so in recent years, the organisation developed an entirely toxic culture. More depressingly, or most depressingly actually, I realised that reference to consumers, including those losing everything, was minimal. The FCA was about trumpeting the smallest outcome that wasn't a complete failure in its own weekly internal briefings.
Does the culture of the FCA encourage and support staff in raising serious and challenging questions, or does it deter them from doing so?
No, the culture of the FCA actively discourages staff from raising serious and challenging questions. Many staff are fed up by senior managers constantly repeating that arguments for consultation via the Staff Consultative Committee are sufficient, even though SCC are for staff that are effectively regular staff and have no routine time off to support other staff.
In the next question, Leslie, there's a bit of a list, so bear with me as I work my way through this list. Have you ever raised concerns or complained officially about the FCA, been a current or past whistleblower, or known of others doing so? If so, what happened, and how do you feel about what happened? What feedback, if any, have you had about your concerns, complaint, or whistleblower? How helpful was the response? How long has it taken for your concerns, complaint, or whistleblower to be processed, and how well or badly do you think the matters were responded to?
Well, yes, I have raised concerns on numerous occasions, and they have been dismissed each and every time. I've raised these concerns via my line manager, but also on occasion with others, and despite saying they understand in some instances, absolutely no one has been willing to do anything that could make them appear they are reasonably questioning a matter. My line manager has never come back to me and appears to adopt an approach where he lets the matter die down or fizzle out, even though the problem invariably gets worse because of that. And instead he stays exactly on track with the official FCA message.
What do you think about the possibility of conflict of interest issues at the FCA?
Well, there have been repeated failures by the FCA to take prompt and robust action against companies. This is despite strong evidence of serious wrongdoing. It's unclear to me how and why the FCA can be so inept, and it may well be the case that it is conflicted by firms.
Do you believe the FCA should be made more accountable to the public, Parliament, or anyone else? And if so, why, and what measures do you think are needed?
Yes, definitely. The FCA has huge benefit, but waste resources on paying senior managers excessive salaries. It has effectively been rewarding failure for years and paying inflated salaries and large bonuses to incompetent senior managers.
What positives are there about the FCA that you'd like to comment on?
Well, there are positives for FCA senior managers only. For example, a question was put to the Executive Committee that whereas the Director General earns 130k at the Treasury, directors and executive directors at the FCA earn much more, which appears entirely unjustifiable.
If you could change 3 things about the FCA, what would they be?
I think one, it would be the culture. It is toxic, and reform doesn't seem possible with many existing heads of departments and directors continuing in post. I think the second point would be the senior management. Many senior managers are part of the toxic culture, which includes behaving out of self-interest and not taking the action they should if it involves any risk of possibly challenging questions for them. I think after 1 or 2 above, 3 is much more about more robust scrutiny of the FCA. The FCA has been focused on self-interest and self-protection only, and it needs to be urgently scrutinised at every level of its strategic and operational activity.
The FCA is undertaking a transformation project. Do you have any comments to make about that? For example, are staff at all levels invited or allowed to participate and contribute? Do you expect this project to alter or influence the culture and policies of the FCA? Do you expect consumer protection to be improved? How could transformation or improvement of the regulators be better handled, do you think?
Well, there was a staff briefing on Tuesday, the 5th of October 2021, headed by Nikhil Rathi. But staff comments included that it is simply not being a meaningful consultation. And a number of people asked why the FCA goes through the pretense of consulting when the evidence indicates there's no real interest in listening in a meaningful way to staff comments. The consultation is regarded by many staff as a sham, and in parallel, confidence in Nicole Rati has plummeted.
A final question. Are there any other comments, Leslie, that you would like to make?
I think only that it's hard to describe just how toxic the FCA has become. On that basis, there's no real likelihood that the current transformation project can improve the situation. It can be understood that the Treasury doesn't want another major upheaval at this time, but the reality is that it is getting worse and will continue to do so. The new CEO made a number of strategic mistakes, including keeping on and moving to different roles members of the ExCo team. In one case, the ExCo manager, regarded by many staff as responsible for much of the failures, LCF in particular, was given the job of transforming the organisation.
Leslie, thank you very much. That comes to an end, the questions that we've put to you. I will first of all thank you, Leslie, for taking time as an existing employee of the Financial Conduct Authority for first of all providing a written submission to the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Personal Banking and Fairer Financial Services call for evidence about the FCA, and also here now today carrying out this conversation with me, which, as you know, is being video recorded and will be put onto the APPG's website. So, Leslie, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
And now I'm going to thank you, Jan Floyd Douglas, for pretending to be Leslie. Leslie, of course, being a made-up name of the FCA employee who has actually provided a written response to the consultation and is supportive that you are speaking his or her words by way of this video interview conversation. Jan Floyd Douglas, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
I'm delighted to assist as ever, Andy. Thank you.